In this PowerPoint video, I'm going to be talking about the BEAM model, which gets you to think about how you will use your sources in your writing. In the last PowerPoint video you watched, we talked about research and research questions, which looked at picking a topic, narrowing down that topic, thinking about what other people are saying about that particular issue that will help inform what you're writing about it. One thing you want to think about is after you're done with all your research and your reading is how you're going to actually use the information you found in your writing or in your presentation. A lot of times you're asked to do an annotated bibliography, and that's just where you're collecting all these different sources and summarizing and evaluating those sources. Eventually, you'll be asked to do a literature review or a paper where you're taking all those sources and you're writing a cohesive argument about a particular topic. The BEAM model is one way to think about how you might categorize the sources you've found. Every source you find could serve more than one purpose, and I'm going to go through examples and talk more about what the BEAM model means. So BEAM is an acronym that stands for background, exhibit, argument, and method. And it's a way of categorizing the different sources that you found or that you've read or listened to. So first, background. If you are using a source for background information, you use it as the writer to present information, establish facts, give context, or to help your reader understand the big picture. The sources you use as background information are completely dependent on the audience. So if your audience is new to the topic or is outside of your field, they might need additional background information. If you're talking to colleagues or other experts in the field, in the same field as you, you might not need to provide as much background information. So some examples of background sources. If I'm exploring how librarians talk about research, that's my topic, is how do librarians talk about research? Depending on my audience, I might use background information from a foundational book on librarianship. It is that I own this book, it's in my office. A website from the American Library Association, or I might use the introduction section of a peer-reviewed scholarly article. So just like other research articles, those authors of those scholarly articles also have to introduce their topic, and that introduction section can be really important for you to get your own background information from. The second category of BEAM is exhibit. If you're using a source as an exhibit for your argument, you as the writer are explaining and interpreting what the exhibit means. You are often referring to a primary source, a specific event, or a specific item as an example. If you think about juries and how a lot of times they're presented with different exhibits of evidence, the juror has to decide whether or not that evidence fits the argument that that person is innocent or that person is guilty. So they're doing that interpretation, just like you as the writer are taking an exhibit and explaining to your readers how it fits into your particular argument. A lot of times it could be things like a personal story, it could be a statistic, it could be a specific item or an event, but you are not using someone else's interpretation of that event or item. That would fall into the next category, which we'll get into. Right now, we're just talking about exhibits. So in my own example, if I'm exploring how librarians talk about research, I might use exhibit information from lesson plans on how to do research. So I'm going to take an actual lesson plan and analyze it. I might take actual library research assignments and interpret what those mean about how librarians talk about research. Or I might use a document that librarians use for research concepts. So these are all primary sources that directly tie into my topic. And then I'm interpreting or explaining what these mean and how they fit into my argument. The third category is argument. If you are using a source to provide additional arguments and analysis besides your own interpretation, you are using insights from other experts or journalists on the topic. And these might be most of the sources that you're finding is other people's interpretations or explanations or their own thesis statements that either relate to yours or match yours. And you then are explaining, you're taking quotes from those articles and explaining how their insights or analysis of the topic relates or adds or responds to your own understanding. So you're doing a quote or you're paraphrasing what they're saying, and then you're talking to your readers about how that ties into your own argument. So as an example, if I'm still exploring how librarians talk about research, I might use argument information from claims from scholarly peer-reviewed articles. So peer-reviewed articles are written by experts and they're published in scholarly journals. And instead of just having an editor approve these, like what happens in magazines or newspapers, it undergoes a peer review process where other experts look at it. Additionally, they're using formal citation styles and they're doing original research. But other sources might also be helpful. So a magazine or a blog article, which could also be written by an expert, but isn't published through the peer review process, might have some additional claims or arguments that relate to my own that I want to include in my research. Finally, the last category of BEAM is method. If you are using a source in order to provide a larger methodology or framework to your argument, you are using an established framework in a particular field. So this provides an overall larger context. A lot of times in a writing class, you might not be using a particular methodology, but if you're in your majors like criminal justice or psychology, you might be introduced to research methods or talk about different foundational methods or theories in your major. So things like feminist theory, deterrent theory, cognitive theory are all large frameworks that might shape the research that you're doing. So for me, if I'm still exploring how librarians talk about research, I might use methodology information from a published theory. So this is Shannon and Weaver's information theory that is well known in the field of library and information science. Or I might use a theory that's published in a scholarly article. So a lot of scholarly articles will also use methodologies to talk about their research. This particular one is the information seeking process from a user's perspective. You might not always have method sources, and that's okay. A lot of your sources might end up being background or exhibits or arguments, and that is fine in how you're using them in your paper. So just to wrap up, BEAM is just a way to categorize the different sources that you find. They might be used as background sources or exhibit or arguments or methods, but they all should serve a particular purpose in your paper. In the next video PowerPoint, I'm going to be talking about how you're going to integrate those into the different sections of your paper.